In a setback for Australian industry, or parts of it anyway, Donald Trump has announced that he'll impose higher tariffs on copper and pharmaceuticals. Speaking at that cabinet meeting this morning, the US president told drug manufacturers they've got 12 to 18 months to, quote, get their act together. While not specifically mentioning Australia, there are concerns over how the tariffs could affect local industry, as the US has long pressured Australia to abolish the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. So Mr. Trump says that businesses that don't manufacture in the US could face a massive increase of taxes of up to 200%.
We'll be announcing something very soon on pharmaceuticals. We're going to give people about a year and a half to come in, and after that they're going to be tariffed if they have to bring the pharmaceuticals into the country, the drugs and other things into the country. They're going to be tariffed at a very, very high rate, like 200%. We'll give them a certain period of time to get their act together.
Now, some major Australian companies, such as CSL, already have a US base, so this is aimed at those who don't. Pharma aside, the US president, as we said, announced he'll impose a 50% tariff on copper imports. Joining us live now, former Deputy Assistant to the President for International Economic Affairs, Kellyanne Shaw. Good to see you this morning, Kellyanne. So 200% hike on pharma. For those who don't set up shop in the United States, a big hike. Is that a negotiation tactic?
Well, good morning, and thanks so much for having me. I think the president certainly has a way of making cabinet meetings much more interesting and newsy than we're accustomed to. Quite a few headlines there earlier today. Now, certainly on pharmaceuticals, he made headlines in the United States with that announcement as well. There is a current investigation called a Section 232 investigation that is pending final decision. You had the Secretary of Commerce who went on right after the cabinet meeting on television and further clarified that we're not actually going to see the final measures announced until the end of July. So there's still a few more weeks until we know exactly what the president's going to do. But I think he definitely foreshadowed that tariffs are in the future. So
if we are seeing a trend from Trump, though, it's this, that he has this big statement to begin with, forces folks to the table, and then the negotiation whittles things down. Do you think this could be another example of that?
Possibly. I sort of caveat all of this to say that there is a real national security imperative underlying that report. And that's in the time of some sort of catastrophic pandemic, some sort of military event, supply chain disruptions. Do we have enough pharmaceutical production in the United States to meet the needs of everyday Americans? And I think COVID really tested the boundaries of that. The clear answer is no. And so the president views tariffs and potentially other measures as a way to onshore much of that supply chain and to increase production. So I don't think the president's willing to necessarily trade that away as part of these negotiations. But what we have seen him do, at least in the case of the United Kingdom, is say, to the extent that the United States is going to adopt future tariffs on pharmaceutical products, we will give you preferential market access with some strings attached. So from Australia's perspective, this is certainly something that the Australian government should be requesting as part of its bilateral negotiations with the United States over these reciprocal tariffs.
So what are you pointing to there? I mean, what would be the advantage for us? What could we get out of it?
Well, to the extent that Australian companies are worried about facing tariff rates up to potentially 200%, I would assume that the government of Australia would be interested in negotiating something similar to what the UK seems to have gotten, which is that their exporters and their producers won't be paying those types of tariffs. And so we've seen these sectoral investigations on steel, aluminum, autos, pharmaceutical, semiconductors as being wrapped up in these broader negotiations. And so my assumption is this is something that both governments are talking about right now.
Okay, so, I mean, it would vary from country to country is what you're saying. This 200% might not apply to us, but it might apply to others who, say, play hardball.
Potentially. It really does depend on those bilateral discussions between Canberra and Washington in terms of what's agreed to and where the real source and pressure points are. I do think that Chinese API and Chinese production of pharmaceuticals does pose more of a national security challenge than maybe imports from other countries, but we'll have to see what the United States does at the end of the day.
Well, two more points. One of those pressure points, I mean, could it be our pharmaceutical benefit scheme, which America and the American government has long despised? We're not going to budge on that, though. Would that be a problem?
Potentially. I think it's very clear that the administration is going after any types of policies in any sectors that have long irked either U.S. exporters or been viewed as discriminatory and disadvantageous to the United States. And so my assumption is it has come up in the context of these bilateral discussions that are happening right now. And so there might be some requests of quid pro quo there, or there may be something else that the government of Australia can offer to help ensure increased production in the United States.
OK, well, our Prime Minister, he's about to head off to China. You referenced China in one of your early answers, Kellyanne. Given that you've worked with Donald Trump before, and much of this trade war, like you pointed out, is aimed directly at China, would the President be taking an interest in our Prime Minister's trip to Beijing that starts this weekend?
Well, President Trump himself even talked today about the great relationship that he has with Xi Jinping. I don't think he takes offense to the fact that world leaders talk to one another. But where there may be some hesitation is to what extent your prime minister is going to agree to things in terms of cooperation, in terms of market access, in terms of national security measures that might be viewed as either compromising the alliance in terms of national security or would give China better access to Australia's market than Australia extends to the United States. So the visit alone, I don't think is problematic. It's really what comes out of that visit that could draw some raised eyebrows in Washington.
It's always interesting talking to you, Kellyanne Shaw. Appreciate it. Thank you.